The courtroom buzzed with restless energy that morning, the kind of uneasy hum that fills the air when something unpredictable is about to happen. Representative Jasmine Crockett, sharp-eyed and unflinching, entered the packed chamber flanked by her aides. Cameras from local and national outlets were clustered outside the courthouse doors, jostling for angles, microphones thrust forward as reporters shouted questions. She ignored them, her stride steady, her expression cool. Jasmine wasn't there to make headlines. She was there to testify. The case, an investigation into corruption within a state-funded development agency, had already drawn massive public attention. But the moment her name appeared on the witness list, the media frenzy quadrupled. She had built a reputation for her fire in congressional hearings and her refusal to be intimidated. But what she didn't expect was that this day would turn from testimony to confrontation, from legal duty to personal humiliation. Presiding over the hearing was Judge Robert Hensley, a man whose reputation preceded him. He was known for his sharp tongue and for running his courtroom with an iron fist. To some, he was a symbol of discipline, to others, an egotistical bully who relished belittling anyone who challenged him. From the moment Jasmine walked in, his piercing stare followed her to the witness stand. "Representative Crockett," he said, his tone dipped in disdain, "please remember that this courtroom is not Congress. We deal in facts here, not political theater." The gallery murmured. His words were barbed, delivered with the kind of arrogance that dared anyone to respond. Jasmine, though, didn't flinch. She adjusted her blazer and met his gaze head-on. "I'm aware, Your Honor," she replied evenly. "I'm here to provide testimony under oath, not to perform." Her poise irritated him. It was obvious from the way he shifted in his chair, leaning back as if testing her limits. "Then let's see if you can manage to answer a question directly," he said. Without the speeches, laughter echoed from a few corners of the room, the kind that stings because it's not just amusement, it's mockery. Jasmine's jaw tensed, but she stayed composed, keeping her tone controlled and measured as she responded to the prosecutor's questions. Still, every time she spoke, Hensley interrupted, his voice rising just enough to dominate hers. When she mentioned a key document, he cut her off. "Ms. Crockett, we don't need a lecture." When she clarified a timeline, he sighed dramatically. "Representative, please, spare us the political posturing." The gallery shifted uncomfortably. Even the stenographer hesitated, unsure how to record the growing tension. Jasmine tried to stay focused, reminding herself that losing composure would only play into his hands. But the judge's smirk, arrogant, knowing, made her blood boil. Then came the breaking point. "Ms. Crockett," Hensley said, looking over his glasses, "I must say, it's fascinating watching you try to stick to the facts. Perhaps if you spent less time grandstanding in Washington and more time understanding the law, this would go smoother." A collective gasp rippled across the courtroom. The jab was personal, deliberate. Jasmine froze for a moment, her lips pressed together in a tight line. The cameras in the room caught everything, the flash of hurt, the quick blink, and then the steel returning to her eyes. "With respect, Your Honor," she said, her voice calm but cutting, "I've spent my career understanding both the law and how easily it can be abused by people who think their position makes them untouchable." The words hung heavy in the air. For the first time, Hensley's smirk faltered. But instead of backing down, he sneered, "Is that a threat?" "Representative, no," she said softly, her tone like ice. "It's a reminder." The hearing stumbled forward after that, but the atmosphere never recovered. Reporters whispered, attorneys exchanged uneasy looks, and even the bailiff seemed tense. When Jasmine finally stepped down from the witness stand, the silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the moment the doors opened, the media swarmed. "Congresswoman Crockett, what happened in there? Do you think the judge crossed a line? Was that sexism?" She said nothing. She simply walked past them, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her expression unreadable. But inside, her mind was racing. She replayed every moment, every insult, every interruption, and one thing stuck out. The judge had mentioned a case detail he shouldn't have known. A small slip, but enough to spark her instincts. Something was wrong with Judge Hensley. As her car pulled away from the courthouse, her phone buzzed with messages, colleagues offering support, journalists requesting statements, friends expressing outrage. But Jasmine stayed quiet, scrolling through her notes, replaying his words. And then she saw it, an inconsistency, something hidden beneath his arrogance that pointed to a deeper truth. Her anger shifted into focus. The humiliation would not stand, but it wasn't revenge she wanted. It was accountability. "Get me everything we have on Judge Hensley," she told her aide over the phone, her voice low and steady. "Every case, every donor, every ruling. I want it all." The aide hesitated. "Congresswoman, what are you thinking?" Jasmine stared out the window, her reflection sharp against the glass. "He tried to embarrass me in his courtroom," she said. "Let's see how he does when the truth is revealed in mine." By the time her car disappeared into traffic, the story of the clash was already exploding online. But no one, not the reporters, not the judge, not even her closest allies, knew that this was only the beginning. In less than 24 hours, the power dynamics would flip completely. The man who mocked her from the bench would soon be standing where he once made others tremble, accused, exposed, and utterly powerless. By sunrise the next morning, the clip of Judge Robert Hensley's humiliating exchange with Representative Jasmine Crockett had already gone viral. Every major outlet, from CNN to local affiliates, was running the footage on repeat. The judge's sneering words, the condescension in his tone, and Jasmine's poised but defiant response had struck a national nerve. Social media exploded with outrage, and hashtags like #RespectJasmine and #JudgeHensleyExposed trended across platforms. But while the internet raged, Jasmine remained silent. No interviews, no posts, no fiery response. Instead, she was already at work. By 8 a.m., she was back inside the courthouse, this time without cameras following her. Gone was the navy blue suit from the day before, she wore a charcoal gray ensemble that matched her mood. Her focus was razor sharp. She wasn't there to revisit the past, she was there to take action. At her side was Marcus Ellison, a former federal prosecutor turned private attorney who had handled political corruption cases before. They met in a quiet conference room with two officials, the state's chief judicial officer and district attorney Carla Ruiz. Jasmine placed a thick, sealed folder on the table and slid it across with deliberate calm. "What you're about to see," she said, "will explain why Judge Hensley was so desperate to discredit me yesterday." Ruiz raised a brow and opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, text logs, and transaction reports, dozens of pages of communication between Judge Hensley and an attorney named Carl Benson, who represented a defendant in the very case Jasmine had testified about. The emails revealed Hensley had been leaking confidential updates about upcoming motions, helping Benson shape his defense. In return, Benson's law firm had funneled money into a political action committee that supported Hensley's re-election campaign. It was damning, it was illegal, and it was thorough. Ruiz's eyes widened as she flipped through the pages. "Where did you get all this?" "From a whistleblower inside the agency," Jasmine replied. "They came to me weeks ago, but I didn't want to interfere with the investigation. Yesterday changed that. When Hensley slipped up and mentioned a sealed motion, I realized he had inside information he couldn't have known unless he was being fed details from the defense." The chief judicial officer leaned back, stunned. "You're accusing a sitting judge of bribery and obstruction." "I'm not accusing him," Jasmine said firmly. "I'm proving it." By 10:30 a.m., investigators had already been dispatched to seize Hensley's official communications. An emergency judicial review session was called behind closed doors, and a warrant was being drafted. Meanwhile, word spread through the courthouse that something big was happening upstairs. Staff whispered in hallways, clerks exchanged nervous looks, and reporters began circling the building like hawks sensing prey. Around noon, Judge Hensley arrived at his chambers, visibly flustered. He had seen the headlines, read the angry editorials, and heard that his conduct was under scrutiny. But when two investigators approached him with questions about campaign donations, his confidence began to crack. He demanded his lawyer, but before one could arrive, the district attorney herself walked in. "Judge Hensley," Ruiz said, her voice even but unyielding, "we have reason to believe you've engaged in misconduct, including the exchange of confidential court information for financial benefit." He scoffed. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Actually," came a voice from behind her, "we do." It was Jasmine. He turned, startled. What are you doing here?" "Following up on the truth," she said. "You remember, you asked me to stick to the facts." His face flushed red. "This is harassment. You think you can walk into my courtroom and—" But before he could finish, two uniformed officers stepped forward. One of them read from a document in hand. "Judge Robert Hensley, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, bribery, and judicial misconduct. You have the right to remain silent." The room froze. The once dominant judge, known for berating defendants and belittling witnesses, stood speechless as the officers cuffed him. Reporters outside heard the commotion and swarmed the entrance. Cameras clicked wildly as Hensley was escorted out in handcuffs, his face pale and tight with disbelief. Jasmine stood a few feet away, her expression composed. When a reporter shouted, "Representative Crockett, is this justice for yesterday?" she simply replied, "This isn't about me. It's about accountability." The video of his arrest spread faster than the original confrontation. By evening, every major news outlet was running side-by-side clips, the judge's insults from the day before and his walk of shame down the courthouse steps. Public reaction was swift and brutal. Calls for judicial reform surged. The state's ethics board suspended Hensley pending investigation, and the governor ordered a review of all his previous rulings. That night, Jasmine finally spoke publicly. Standing outside the courthouse, surrounded by flashing lights and microphones, she delivered a statement that would be replayed for days. "No one," she said, her voice steady and resolute, "is above the law. Yesterday, a man in power tried to use his bench to humiliate me and undermine the truth. Today, that same man learned that justice doesn't answer to arrogance. It answers to evidence." Her words drew applause from onlookers. As she turned to leave, a reporter called out, "Congresswoman, what's next for you?" She paused for a brief moment, then smiled faintly. "Next," she said, "I go back to doing my job, making sure this system works for the people it's meant to serve." As she disappeared into the night, the courthouse behind her glowed in the camera lights, a monument to poetic justice. Judge Robert Hensley had fallen from his throne, not through vengeance or politics, but through the power of truth wielded by the woman he tried to demean. And across the country, people whispered the same sentiment. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win, she set an example.